let's talk gun violence, right? Yeah. We spend all our time talking about how can we stop this? Well, and I don't want to get necessarily into a gun control debate, but it's gun control or not. We got to. And my underlying question is, why is this happening? There are issues underneath it, and so I think addressing the issue as to why it's happening versus how can we lessen it. When it's still going to. It's an indictment on our culture too, man. I mean, I don't know what the abortion rates are in other countries. I'm sure some are higher than us and some are probably much lower than us.
Yeah, and we have more gun attacks than elsewhere. We don't have the same sort of like knife attacks and acid attacks and, some other very atrocious acts of violence.
Acid attacks?
Literally, vats of acid. Like that's common over in like the UK, I've heard quite commonly. And then you go over to a place like South Africa, they don't have the same, gun, problem that we have, at least as propagated in the news. But I think depending on like the person, I've seen like a Vice News piece about the assassin, economy over there. And there's literally an economy around assassinations that you could pay.
This is in Europe?
South Africa.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
And it's like
you can make
probably $5, $50, $500, literally to take someone's life.
Yeah.
That is nuts. And it's like, as bad as it's awful. We had it here in Georgia, right? Up in like Brazelton, in the district of the mayor that I know, that school shooting, right? This past fall, shortly before the election, right? And obviously no one ever wants to see one of those news clips. But to your point, it's taking away guns that lawful citizens have isn't going to be the problem, and you're not going to keep guns out of the hands of unlawful citizens or otherwise.
Yeah. And with our country being, I would say, founded with firearms and the freedom.
The Minutemen, literally giving us this country, fighting for this country.
The Wild West, and think of how much. Think guns are a part of the culture here, and there's so many. I think your dad made the interesting comment that if any, and I may have said this already once before, but any crazy terrorist group or any country or military group that would try to invade and literally take over our country,
good luck.
They're going to have to face all the weapons that we already have here from a ground perspective.
Right.
So, and that's a kind of a.
But no, I
kind of a base argument, but it does.
I echoed
sense.
The same sentiment with drones, right? You layer that on top of drones, and again, if we were to get invaded, I think that sentiment held true up until even now. But let's say China was able to get within 1,000 miles, a few hundred miles of our shore, and they could, launch some aircraft that could then come even closer and start deploying drones in the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions. Good luck even with a civilian populace that, is armed with guns, in the way that we are. I really think that we do have to start looking at even like those consumer flying camera drones as weapons, covered within the Second Amendment. Because again, those just flying camera drones are the ones that we are being seen used in very effectively in modern warfare, like in the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Quick, since you brought up drones, and you own Drones I View, and it's I View Media. Drones I View.
Yes.
What is the parent company? What's the big parent? Is it?
Yeah. So I started the company as Drones I View, which you had right. And the legal business name is Drones I View Incorporated. So we started as an LLC. Then when we brought in an investor, he wanted us to actually incorporate to bring in more sophisticated investors.
Drones I View Incorporated.
That's the parent company.
Includes I View Media.
And then I View Robotics, which is our hardware division that actually makes the drones. And those are really like two separate business units. They're really two divisions. They operate separately, but right now, all of like our revenue still just comes through one independent entity, right? Just because then we don't have to like double up the accounting and all like the G&A sort of operations, I'm
waiting one day to hear Drones I View Defense, where you're creating drones or some component, some facet for military use.
I think that could be
a government contract.
I think that could be a subset of I View Robotics. I mean, when we first started developing our first drone back in this was March of 2019. Like we literally hit the drawing board. And then by the end of the year, we submitted for an Air Force contract, didn't get it, got some great feedback. And then similarly, June, I think, of 2020, we submitted for our second government contract. Similarly, didn't get it, but they basically said, we love the product, we love your team, we love everything about this, but we want to see this already commercialized, and then we want to be able to adapt it to military use. But in my eyes, and what I've always been told, and what I've always understood, is the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the SBIR program, is to help you to basically commercialize your research in the form of the military or another government agency adopting it, and then testing it, becoming your first customer, allowing you to then spin it out to the larger consumer commercial market. And so went in with that. And I think that is the way that it works for a lot of companies, but it is like any other business. It's the who you know versus the what you know oftentimes. And we did have a couple people that looked over our proposals, and a couple guys that were both ex-military on ours, but just didn't have the right person that's reviewing the contract, or, knowing the person that's reviewing the contract or the proposal. So I think it will make sense for us to be producing drones that are used within the military, or at least by our government. But going at it from more the consumer approach that I was talking about, Microsoft, making Microsoft Office more so as a consumer commercial product. And then it's just so easy to use that, of course, the government's going to use it for all their paper pushers, their soldiers, whoever needs to, use productivity software like that, right?
And I went onto this because of something that you were just saying about the Chinese, let's say, with the ability to
send swarms of drones.
So are you saying now this is the visionary thing, looking in the future? We had said, I think at the last podcast, about how military use of these drones it's already here, and we're seeing it, and it has been here for a while, right? It's only getting more. It's only going to go up as far as technology and capabilities and breadth of capabilities and all these things. Do you actually foresee in the future where troops are going to be attacked by individual drones are going to be the things that are going to be used?
That's literally what's happening.
That's what's happening now. Yeah. I know there are big drones that can deliver payload onto a target.
But again, a lot of in Ukraine, the Russia war, you see, unfortunately, I've seen more than I would like to, is you see these kamikaze drones, and they're either piloted, or some of them even have AI where they can detect people and
they fly into them and blow up.
And so some of those are kamikaze drones, and they're the racing drones that hobbyists, use the little goggles with, and they'll fly those from a few miles away. Some of them are even the internet or satellite communications oriented drones, so they can be hundreds or thousands of miles away in some cases. But a lot of the most common drones are literally just the consumer drones, flying camera drones, and they have just enough customization to it where you can program a button on the controller to release a release mechanism. And so they're really not meant to be equipped with release mechanisms, but they just barely have that ability to be able to attach one and then press a button on the controller to then drop a grenade or whatever explosive. And so you talk about the progression of these military super complex drones, but there's really not. Obviously there's the Predator drones that we've heard about being used overseas, the Guardian, which is our more domestic version that's not weaponized but still large military grade drone. Of course those are still going to continue progressing, continue replacing more the fighter pilot bomber roles, the more traditional manned aviation roles. But the smaller drones that are being used by the ground soldiers, or replacing the ground soldiers in some cases, that's by and large just going to be the same as the consumer commercial technology. And then it may be just weaponized. But by and large, I don't think there's this huge delineation between the military, small drone technology, and the consumer drone technology.